Good day. Today we will be talking about Singapore, its politics, economy, social and culture, and finally a domestic issue of Singapore.
Politics. The politics of Singapore contains three major parts in its political system. These are the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Now, in these three major parts, each one has its own rules. For the first one, the legislature, it makes the law of the land. The next one, which is the executive, it administers the law. And for the last one, it interprets the law through the courts. Now, this contains as well in the political system the Prime Minister as its head of the government and the President as its head of the state. Being an unicameral system or unicameral authority, meaning that the Parliament of Singapore only has one house, meaning that all the members of the Parliament are voted in a regular general election. Now, amongst multiple political party, if the leader has secured the most seats in the parliament, they will be asked to be the next prime minister for the government. By being the next prime minister of the government, he or she will be selecting his own or her own ministers from the elected members of the parliament to form its cabinet members. Now, within the system as well, we are to have, we are to make an election to have a vote for the Speaker of the Parliament. Now, the Speaker will be elected when the new Parliament meets for the first time after general election. So, after the voting of members of the Parliament, the Speaker of the Parliament will be voted next. The lifeline or the duration for each Parliament is 5 years from its date of its first meeting or sitting. In the general election, it must be held within 3 months of the dissolution of the parliament. Within the political system of Singapore, there contains also how the functions of the parliament is done. So the functions of the parliament include on making its laws, taking up the critical role to check on the actions and policies of the government, and then scrutinizing the state's finances or the country's finances itself. Now, one of the parliament's main functions is to make the laws of the country. Now, before it is passed or before it is approved, it should be first introduced within the parliament as a draft called a bill. Now, these bills are usually introduced by a minister on behalf of the government. However, any members of the House can introduce a bill known as a private member bill. All bills must go through three readings in the Parliament to receive the President's assent, which means the President's approval, to become an Act of Parliament or the law for the government. As it's seen here, you can see the image that is shown and how a step-by-step process is done to approve for the bill that is passed by one of the minister or one of the members of the parliament. Here is where I will explain each one, how's it done before reaching to the end when it has become a permanent bill for the parliament or a law for the government. The first reading is when we are introduced by a new bill that has been submitted by a member from the parliament. In the second reading, this is where the debate of the general principles or merits of the bills are done, where they will decide if it has a positive or negative side for the government and the country. The next is the committee stage. This bill will be referred to the Committee of the Whole Parliament or a selected committee where it is considered in detail and its provisions amended. So this will be introduced to the other parliament members or selected members within the parliament to consider if this should be moved on further. On the third reading, we are here where we will be reconsideration or reconsidering within the committee as the bill is reported back to the Parliament for its third reading. So this means it is to be considered in the committee, and then when after that, you are to have this bill reported back again to the Parliament's general part for a third reading, where this will be again decided for its principles and merits of the bill. The Presidential Council for Minority Rights, or the PCMR. So the PCMR will ensure if the bill is not a disadvantage to the person or any racial or religious community. Basically, this is where the humane, or what we call ethics line, comes in, where they will be deciding this bill targets or affects any of the law that will personally bring down the rights of a person's ethics or a person's moral within the government or within the country. The next is then the presidential's assent. So once a bill has been agreed by the PCMR, it is sent to the president for his assent, after which the bill becomes an act of the parliament. So once this is all done, this will be sent to the president of the state, the president of the government, where this will be finally approved by the president since it has been gone through all five of these processes. After going through the president's assent, we'll be going to the last step, which is the gazetting. Now, this is when the law becomes an operational law or comes to operations on a date named in the notification published in the government's Gazette, meaning that this will finally be publicly known amongst the members of the parliament that this has been confirmed or approved thoroughly by the government itself, and soon will be also announced to the common people within the country. Moving on, we have other parts within the political system, and this is the election to the chair. So currently, right now, the election to the chair is Mr. Tan Konjin. He is the current Speaker of the Parliament of Singapore. He was elected to the post by the members of the Parliament on 11th of September 2017, making him the 10th Speaker of Singapore since the first Legislative Assembly of 1955. Currently, Mr. Tan has been the elected MP in the Marine Parade GRC since 7th May 2011. He has also worked for the Minister of the Social and Family Development, and also until he was still in that position till his election as Speaker of the Parliament of Singapore. He has also been the Minister of Manpower before that as well. He is currently now married to two children and enjoys running and photography. So, as a person of the Speaker of the Parliament of Singapore, he currently also served in the armed forces for nearly 24 years. Now, next is the cabinet. The Constitution provides for the organs of the state. Namely, this means the executive, which is the cabinet, the legislature, and the judiciary. The president, as the head of the state, appoints the prime minister and the other cabinet members amongst the elected members of the parliament. Currently, that person is Miss Indrani Raja, appointed by the prime minister. The leader of the house is responsible for the arrangement of the government business and the legislative system of the parliament. The leader is also proposed appropriate actions to be taken on any presidential matters, or sorry, procedural matters arising in the parliament. So currently, Miss Andrani Raja is the leader of the House, and as the leader of the House, she has to actually move procedural motions related to the business of the House during sittings, such as to extend the time of sittings beyond the usual time as set out in the standing order. Currently, she is the leader of the House, which she has assumed office during August 2020. She is assisted by the Deputy Leader of the House, Mr. Sanji Muhammad. The Leader of Opposition. So currently the position for the Leader of Opposition is Mr. Pritam Singh. On July 11, 2020, the Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong pronounced or announced that Mr. Singh, Secretary General of the Workers' Party, was designated leader of the opposition of the 14th Parliament of Singapore. His duties as the leader of the opposition includes leading an opposition in presenting alternative views in the parliamentary system, debating on the politics, the bills, and motion done within the government, leading and organizing scrutiny of the government's position and actions in the parliament, and being consulted as well on the appointed of opposition members in selected or select committees, including standing select committees such as the Public Accounts Committee. So he views or voices out different opinions aside from the main government of the parliament system in Singapore. The government party whip. Now, in the government party whip, Dr. Janil Putcheri, the party whip who ensures the good communication within the party and contributes to the smooth running of the party parliamentary machinery. So the whip lists the speaking members of the parliament for each item of business and estimates the time required so that a sitting can be completed within the schedule. So what does that mean? It means that the government party whip, he is often regarded as the dis- dis- disciplinary of the respective party, the whip that ensures that there is sufficient party members in the chamber to support the party's position and that the MPs or the members of parliament votes according to the party line. Acco- uh, Most likely or generally, he may lift the whip and allow the members of the parliament to vote according to their own conscience or their own will. The present government party whip, as I said earlier, is Dr. Janil. So he is also assisted by the deputy government whip, Miss Sim An. Now, in the members of parliament. So members of parliament consist of elected, non-constitutionally, and nominated members. Most MPs also are elected to the parliament at a general election on the first past the post basis and represents either single member cons- constitutions or group representation constitutions. So these are the SMCs or GRCs. So as I explained earlier, so the members of parliament can either are elected, sorry, during the general election. So here we can further understand how they are elected. So they can be elected in either of these two, which is being a single member or in a group. Now, amongst the elected members, like in the GRC, political parties field a team of at least 3 or 6 candidates. At least one candidate in the team must belong to the minority race. This requirement ensures that the party contesting the elections in GRC are a multiracial so that the minority race will be represented in the parliament. There were 17 GRCs and 14 SMCs in the 2020 general election. Now, to further understand what this means, that being elected or being an elected member must contain 3 to 6 candidates. So this refers within the GRC. So for the SMC, being that it stands for single member constitutionary, that means it can be run by only a single member. For the group, as explained earlier, it can be run from up to 3 or 6 candidates. Now, saying that you have to include a single minority race means that it will be the minority race that are citizens or within the country of Singapore. Example, these are other nationalities that are not in the general public of Singapore. Me giving an example of like for the Japanese, Filipinos, Australians, and other nationalities that are considered minorities since they are much less to the general public of Singapore. Now, for the non-constitution members, the constitution allows up to 12 NC MPs to be declared or elected. Now, the NC MPs are declared as MPs for the opposition candidates who are or who had contested in the general elections and were not voted in but had received the highest percentage of votes amongst the unelected candidates from the opposition parties. This ensures that they will always be a member or minimum number of opposition members in the parliament, and the views of others than the government can be expressed in the parliament. So those who are also not voted have still a chance to be part within the parliament, but as an opposition member of the government. So this consists of those who have the highest percentage being voted amongst the opposition members within the parliament. Now, for the nominated members, the Constitution provision for the appointed of up to 9 nominated members. It was made during the 1990s to ensure a wide representation of communities' views in Parliament. So the NMPs are appointed by the President Singapore, which for a term of 2.5 years on the recommendation of a special select committee of Parliament chaired by the Speaker. The MPs contribute to the independent and non-partitional views in the Parliament. Within the Parliament, there are selected or select committees. So there are a total of 7 select committees appointed for the duration of the term of the Parliament to undertake various functions. This consists of the Committee of Selection, Committee Committee of Selections, Committee of Privileges, Estimated Committee, House Committee, Public Accounts Committee, Public Petitions Committee, and Standing Orders Committee. For the other committees or other selected committees, besides for the 7 main selected committees, the Parliament sometimes form an additional committee sets up to the motion approved by the House to deal with bills or other matters referred to it. The Parliament Secretariat, which is the Secretariat assisted by the Parliament in its functions and all matters connected of its procedures and practices. So basically, this is like the secretary to the Parliament system or the Parliament in the government. So they also organize the Parliament's business and proceedings and the work undertaken by its committees. The Presidential Council for Minority Acts and the ASEAN Inter-Parliamentary Assembly and other parliamentary associations. Now, ending in knowing what is the political system of Singapore, amidst in global economy headwinds, Singapore still remains as one of the most strongest economy in ASEAN Republic. Anchored by the political stability, low corruption rates, and transparent public institutions, they are to be trusted partners for the business. The sound of monetary and fiscal policies, together with a robust judicial system, will undergo or underpin their low risk economy. So their system works and it also gives a huge advantage amongst other ASEAN members or even other countries in the world. Being of that, their political system gives in a low to mid ratio of corruption as well as economy wise solutions for their selected problems in the country. That is all for the political system or the politics of Singapore.
I am Vincent Li and I will present facts according to this economy of Singapore. Singapore boasts the third highest per capita GDP in the world in terms of purchasing power parity. Singapore is also the 14th largest exporter and the 15th largest importer in the world. Even until 2022, Singapore ranks as the second freest economy in the world, only behind Hong Kong. Singapore does not have a minimum wage, believing that it would lower its competitiveness. Singapore's corrupt-free government, skilled workforce, and advanced and efficient infrastructure have attracted so many investments from more than 7,000 multi-corporations from United States, Japan, and Europe. Did you know Singapore is also the second largest foreign investor in India? Roughly 44% of the Singaporean workforce is made up of non-Singaporeans. The Port of Singapore is one of the 5 busiest ports in the world. Singapore has free trade access to the entirety of the ASEAN network. The government has also encouraged firms to invest outside of Singapore. Even the World Bank has named Singapore as the easiest place in the world to do business and ranks Singapore as the world's top logistics hub. Singapore is also the world's 4th largest foreign exchange trading center after London, New York, and Tokyo. Singapore has 4 official languages: English, Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. English is the preferred language for business and in public administration because it is the international language, making it an attractive place for multinational corporations. It is one of the Asian 4 tigers: the Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. The Singapore Economic Development Board continues to attract investment funds on a large scale for the country despite the city's relatively high-cost operating environment. Singapore's economy depends heavily on exports and refining imported goods, especially in manufacturing, which includes significant electronics, petroleum, refining, chemicals, mechanical engineering, and biomedical sciences sector. Did you know, in 2011, Singapore's imports totaled to $311.7 billion and exports totaled $414.8 billion. Singapore's main imports are aircraft, crude oil and petroleum products, electronic components, radio and television receivers and parts, motors, chemicals, food, iron, and textile yarn fabrics. Singapore's principal exports are petroleum products, food and beverages, chemicals, textile or garments, electronic components, telecommunication apparatus, and transport equipment. Listed are the main import partners of Singapore. Malaysia ranks first in 10.6%, China second 10.3%, USA in 10.2%, South Korea 6.8%, then followed by Japan 6.2%, Indonesia in 5.3%, Saudi Arabia in 4.5%, and United Arab Emirates, the UAE, in 4.1%. The main export partners are once again in first, Malaysia in 12.2%, followed by Hong Kong 10.9%, China 10.7%, Indonesia in 10.5%, United States in 5.5%, Japan in 4.6%, Australia in 4.2%, then followed by South Korea in 4.0%. It should be noted that Malaysia has been the strongest import and export partners by Singapore for a long shot because of the distance they share between each other. Tourism also forms a large part of the economy, and 10.2 million tourists visited the country in 2007. To attract more tourists, the government legalized gambling in 2005 and allowed 2 casino resorts. It's called the integrated resorts, and it's still to be developed. But I think as of 2022, it's already finished. Singapore also promotes itself as a medical tourism hub. About 200,000 foreigners seek medical care there each year. Singapore's medical services aim to serve at least 1 million foreign patients annually and to generate $3 billion in revenue. Singapore is an educational hub and many foreign students study in Singapore. More than 80,000 international students studied in Singapore in 2006. In 2009, 20% of all students in Singaporean universities were international students, the exchange students. The students are mainly from ASEAN, China, and India. Singapore is also considered to be a global financial hub, with Singapore banks offering world-class corporate bank account facilities. Banking in Singapore is a service industry that has grown significantly in recent years. Total banking assets under management in Singapore rose from about $92 billion in 1998 and to about $350 billion in 2004. Business and banking hours are generally from 8:30 to 6 p.m. on the weekdays. Banks are generally open from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. More facts about Singapore's economy includes Singapore is a world leader in several economic areas. Singapore is the world's fourth leading financial center. It is the world's second largest casino gambling market, one of the world's top 3 oil refining centers, the world's largest oil producer, and a major hub for ship repair services. The world depends so much on Singapore. Singapore's economic strategy produced a real growth averaging from 8% from 1960 to 1999. The economy picked up in 1999 after the regional financial crisis with a growth rate of 5.4%, followed by 9.9% for 2002. Because of the worldwide electronic slump, Singapore had reduced the estimated economic growth in 2001 to a negative 2%. The Economic Review Committee was set up in December 2001 and recommended several policy changes to revitalize the economy. Singapore's economy expanded by 2.2% the following year and 1.1% in 2003 when Singapore was affected by the SARS outbreak. Subsequently, a major turnaround occurred in 2004 allowed it to make a big significant recovery of 8.3% growth in the country. In 2005, economic growth was 6.4%, and in 2006, 7.9%. It just continues to grow and grow. As of June 8, 2013, Singapore's unemployment rate is only around 1.9%, and the GDP in 2011 is $318.9 billion, and it has grown so much, and it grows about 5.8% every year. That's all for the economy of Singapore.
Singaporean social culture. Most describe Singapore as regimented. It is a fast-paced and rigid society. Although ethnically diverse, the citizenry share a link in finding social constructs such as hierarchy, filial piety, and faith important. Chinese influence in Singaporean culture, mainly Confucianism, stresses the importance of a clear hierarchy as it is believed that a natural inequality promotes harmony among individuals. Reason being that there is a role for everyone to fill that coincides with that of superiors and subordinates. This is also the reason as to why Singaporeans have extremely strict business etiquette and why they hold utmost importance in staying true to one's promises. They don't want people disrupting the harmony built upon by adhering set of rules. Filial piety is among the Singaporean concepts that traces its roots back to Chinese influence. It is a belief that states one's parents and ancestors are owed reverence and therefore children must care for, love, serve, and respect and obey them. In essence, filial piety revolves around the idea that an individual must repay their parents for bearing and caring for said individual. The concept of faith is a concept shared by many cultures around the world. Among them is Singapore. It refers to the idea that one has a self mainly molded by social credit. It can also be interpreted as a reflection of one's worth in social lenses. Faith is something that can be lost and saved, therefore, Singaporeans make it a priority not to lose faith. Singapore is a diverse metropolis that hosts more than 5 million people from different ethnic backgrounds. Each group draws from their ethnic homeland for their group identity, resulting in the city-state not having a singular national identity. There are 5 shared values among the citizenry that emphasizes the importance of nation, family, community, consensus, and harmony. Outside of these 5 shared values, Singaporeans exhibit a fascination with the 5 C's and kiasu. The 5 C's, formerly considered the Singapore Dream, is a concept that encapsulates the goal of many Singaporeans, mostly white-collar workers. The 5 C's refer to cash, credit, card, car, condominium, and country club membership. Cash is financial security is chief among the Singaporean 5 C's. It's a global status symbol that everyone understands the importance of. Credit card, another symbol of affluence. The greater the limit, the higher value it holds. Car, being a hard-to-reach commodity in Singapore, ownage of a car directly annotates wealth. Condominium, another concept that where rarity dictates social value. In a country where a majority of land is subsidized by the government, privately developed land directly reflects affluence. Country club membership. Like most of our world, country club memberships are hard to attain. Only a select few can afford the admission to such a place that getting into one is a status symbol in itself. Kiasu. Kiasu is the fear of missing out or losing. In a very high-paced society in Singapore, competition is natural. Singaporeans are raised believing that if they fail to exert their utmost potential, someone is going to take their place from them. This stems from Singapore being a meritocracy, a system where climbing the ladder via high grades and being exemplary in your work is very much rewarded. Social customs. Pointing fingers is considered offensive in Singapore. A great alternative is to make use of the whole arm when pointing in a direction. Uncle and auntie are common ways of addressing the elderly in Singapore, as it is seen as a sign of respect. Heads are considered sacred and feet dirty, so make sure not to touch anyone's head and point your feet at someone. It is important to note that most social cultures such as dress codes, dining etiquette, and the like in Singapore is subjective to the unique lifestyle of each ethnic group. Culture. As a country that is multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multicultural society, Singapore is a unique blend of cultures and traditions. Singapore categorizes its ethnic groups into 4, namely Chinese, Malay, Indian, and others. According to a June 2022 demographic survey, the largest ethnic groups that resides in Singapore are Chinese, followed by Malays, Indians, and others. Religion. Knowing that the residential demographic of Singapore is predominantly Chinese, it is to no surprise that Chinese Buddhism is the main religion of Singapore. To be precise, religious belief in Singapore are heavily influenced by Confucianism. Food. In terms of food, Singaporean cuisine is diverse in such extremes that the country does not have its national dish. However, hawker centers have been an integral part of Singapore daily life that it has been a unique culture all in its own, and was successfully inscribed as part of the 2020 UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. According to Oxford Dictionary, a hawker is defined as a person who travels around selling goods, typically advertising them by shouting. Since the 1800s, hawker culture has been around. Stalls all around Singapore fill the streets, and eventually prospered to have hawker centers. The culture in and of itself reflects Singaporean values and history. The diverse cuisine and hawker centers show the inclusivity of various races that are based on Singapore, and the origin of hawkers show how Singapore started as a poor country but managed to rise.
Singapore is among the most globalized economies in the world, with manpower playing a dominant role in its meteoric rise to becoming an economic powerhouse, transforming itself from a low middle income country in the 1960s to the high income country that it is today. With such a heavy reliance on manpower, an issue regarding their population could cause cascading effects that will ripple throughout their nation. This brings us to the subject of Singapore's low fertility rate and its rapidly aging population. Singapore has experienced a prolonged period of declining fertility and high life expectancy for more than 3 decades. Singapore's fertility rate in 1957 peaked to 6 children per woman, but dramatically declined to the replacement level of 2.15 by 1957. The life expectancy at birth has also increased from around 68 years in 1970 to 80.4 years in 2007. Declining fertility rates and increasing life expectancy, both at birth and during old age, has led to profound changes in the age structural composition of the population. This has resulted in population aging, labor force shortages, increasing elderly dependency ratios, and feminization of the elderly population. This has also implications for the resources needed for retirement and healthcare. The population aged above 65 years, as projected by the United Nations, will increase from about 0.46 million in 2010 to 1.41 million in 2030, an increase of 207% in just 2 decades. Life expectancy at age 65, currently at 17.2 years for men and 20.6 years for women, is also expected to rise, thereby posing even greater challenges in managing an aging society. The median age of the resident population in 2007 was 36.4 years, and this is expected to increase to 53.7 by 2050. Singapore's total fertility rate has been below the replacement rate for over 3 decades. Policymakers realize that measures designed to increase the total fertility rate, such as the Children Development Co-Savings or the Baby Bonus Scheme, increased maternity leave, and subsidies for infant and child care aren't likely to have a significant impact on fertility levels. Therefore, the primary instrument in tackling the issue is the large-scale and sustained but selective net immigration. Singapore has sent out strong signals that such net immigration will be pursued without changing the dominant Chinese character of the city-state or altering the ethnic composition. With this in mind, the Fair Consideration Framework, or the FCF, was announced by the Ministry of Manpower in 2013, and the mandatory job advertising process was implemented in August 2014. In March 2022, the Ministry of Manpower announced yet another significant update. The Complementarity Assessment Framework, also known as COMPASS, that will be implemented in September 2023, is a new points-based assessment system for employment pass applications with an objective of bringing in foreign professionals who are complementary to the workforce, encouraging diversity and building a strong Singaporean core. While there's no denying that immigration contributes to the expansion of the labor force and fills skill gaps in the economy, these gains are not without social and economic impact. The percentage of Singapore's non-resident population grew significantly from 2004 and reached a high in 2008. The rapid growth resulted in negative sentiments toward immigrants and to issues such as job competition and strain on the country's infrastructure, among other anxieties.